Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and looking at currently where it is in the charts on the grand scheme of things, the macro level view, as well as dive into some ideas behind what's currently going on and talking about it with respect to say the rest of the cryptocurrency market. So, if you guys like this content, please subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that. And also, check out the Telegram channel in the description below if you guys want to join a growing community of around 2,100 members. If you prefer Discord, we also have a Discord channel that is growing. There's around 600 members or so. But whatever floats your boat, feel free to join the community. So, we talked about the 200-week moving average for a long time, and we've talked about how it has held support in times past. Obviously, we can't say it held support in the first market cycle because we didn't have a 200-week back here. In fact, it came close to holding the 100-week moving average. So, in terms of holding the 200-week in the second cycle, and then, we have mentioned this before. A lot of people said that the 300-week moving average more or less just came out of nowhere. But we have actually talked about it on the channel on a number of videos, so I would like to alert you to that. But when we fell below the 200 week, we came basically straight down to the 300 week, which is around $3,800. And obviously it depends on what exchange you're using, but I would say somewhere between $3,700 and $3,800. So the issue here, right, with the 200-week moving average is that we have closed below it, and you can see that our current candle is definitely below the 200-week moving average. In fact, we've seen a wick down to around $4,400 or so. Now, this begs the question: if the 200-week moving average has held as support for such a long period of time, breaking it, it would seem that then it would hold some level of resistance, because getting through such a strong moving average might not be easy. Well, there's also the fact that a lot of people, back when Bitcoin was at $3,100 and $4,000, I mean, I think most crypto people out there said we would be below $6,000 for the next year or so. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember that. And then we just blew past $6,000. I mean, sometimes Bitcoin just doesn't really care about what all the TA, any type of TA, whatever anyone wants to put out there, it just really doesn't care. And it'll do its own thing. And you can imagine that volatility right now with Bitcoin is so high that it doesn't seem like it would be that impossible for it to move above the 200 week. I mean, just the other day, the Fed, talked about cutting interest rates and quantitative easing, and right when that happened, Bitcoin pumped up to $5,900 before then coming back down. So clearly, it's not impossible for us to get above that in the short term. It doesn't mean we will, but it's certainly not an impossible task. But anyways, it is somewhat concerning, of course, with traditional markets that we're seeing such a swift decline. And in fact, the Dow today is down around 3,000 points, which is, I think it's the most, not necessarily percentage, but it's the most in history in terms of being down a certain number of points in one day. So, I can't really say if that's the bottom or not. I mean, in terms of panicking and fear, I think the worst is yet to come. But you also have to remember that the bottom of a market does not also equate to the bottom of, say, or the height of panic, because you have to account for the fact that people are pricing things in ahead of time, rather than necessarily waiting for a certain event to arrive. So it's really impossible to say. I don't think anyone fully knows where it's going to happen. Of course, you're going to have people calling it one way or another and then bragging about it later if they get it right, because if enough people call for enough different scenarios, someone's going to be right. But right now, you can see that we are below the 200-week moving average, and we have a candle just below it, which has never happened in the history of Bitcoin. Because even if you look back to the last market cycle where we had candles that were basically on the 200-week moving average, we didn't have any that were just completely below it and going significantly below it. Even this one barely touched the 200-week moving average. But of course, we had many wicks that went significantly below the 200-week moving average. Now, you know, I am a Bitcoin bull. I will, I don't see myself changing on that. Ultimately, I do think Bitcoin will go to higher highs and continue to go through these lengthening cycles. But with that said, that doesn't mean that it won't go down more in the short term. With the volatility the way it is, it's not that hard to imagine. Just today, it went down to $4,500 or so. But we've talked about the 300-week moving average before on the channel. If you're watching it, if you see Bitcoin drop, and we said this in prior videos before we dropped to the 200-week, if you see Bitcoin drop below the 200-week, then a key area, a theoretical area of support would be the 300-week moving average. And the reason is if that's just the next key level. And you can think of holding the 100 week in the first market cycle to 200 week in the second market cycle, and then the 300 week in the third market cycle. And I'm talking about after the peaks. So the peak, then go down, hold the 100 week, and then a peak, go down, hold the 200 week, and then we had another peak, and then going down and holding the 300 week. Now, the 300 week, it is at $3,700 to $3,800. Obviously, below that is our previous bottom at around 3,100. So getting to that and dropping below that would obviously not be a good thing in the short term. But again, we've maintained on this channel that 2019 and 2020, we don't exactly know where price is going to go. But the idea is that you are accumulating Bitcoin during this time. So if anything, you could consider this an opportunity that has presented itself before you, that Bitcoin is trading around $5,000, and most people a few months ago would have jumped on that chance. Now, I'm not saying you should go buy Bitcoin at $5,000 immediately. You could always place buy orders below that price where you might think that you think they might hit. The key thing I will say to watch would be traditional markets. If traditional markets keep plummeting, then I don't expect cryptocurrency to take off. I mean, if people are worried about how they're going to buy noodles for the week or have gas money, and you're worried about spreading the coronavirus to your relatives and people that are close to you having complications with that, then a lot of times cryptocurrency is one of the last things on your mind. So people just aren't going to, I don't think that people are going to really be thinking about cryptocurrency as much when the growth rate of COVID-19 is as exponential right now. But with that said, it could present a nice opportunity in terms of buying some cheap Bitcoin. So I know me and a few other people in the private group had we had buys around the 300-week moving average, and I think some of ours got hit, some of them didn't. It depends on exactly where you placed it. And a key point of advice, if you are looking to place buy orders at certain milestones, whether it's say the 200 week or the 300 week, whatever it might be, you might consider taking whatever that number is and either adding it, just going either just higher or just lower, depending on what direction you're coming from. Because a lot of times, if you set it to say, let's say you set you just choose a number in your head of say $6,000. Well, there's going to be, there's theoretically going to be more sell pressure at $6,000 than there would be at say like 5,950. So it can kind of help you, ensure that say a sell order is met or a buy order is met if you think like that, and try to get kind of like just a slight edge on the market in that way. Now, one of the things we've talked about before with Bitcoin is when it breaks the 20-week, Bitcoin dominance goes up. And if Bitcoin dominance is going up, well, then typically that would often mean that you should be, I'm not saying you should be, this is not financial advice, but what I do when the Bitcoin dominance, or when Bitcoin breaks the 20-week, as I mentioned before, is I tend to increase my Bitcoin holding and, obviously decrease the altcoin holding. Because if Bitcoin dominance is going up, obviously it would be more beneficial to have your money in Bitcoin or even stable coins than to ride it out in altcoins when the market is not doing well. And we've talked about plenty of times when we're below the 20-week moving average, altcoins are typically not doing well. And if we look at a Bitcoin dominance chart, so let's look to see first when we broke the 20-week. So the 20-week was around $8,500. And if you go to a daily chart, you can see that we broke it 8,500, so we broke it right here. This was on March 8th. So if we look to see what happened on March 8th, this is just for you guys. So that, I mean, you don't even have to tune into the channel in the future to keep this knowledge with you. But if you go back and look at what happened on May 8th, where we broke the 20-week moving average, we go over here to May 8th, you can see that we instantly went from 63.38% up to 64.62%. So we jumped up a whole percentage point in one day. And even since then, we even pumped a lot higher up to around 66.6% dominance, and obviously have retraced some, but clearly we are on an uptrend here. So the reason I say this is because a lot of people have the mentality of, of holding all your altcoin positions forever, which is fine. If you want to do that, it's fine. But you have to remember that, the chances that something like 2017 happening again, where literally every altcoin in the top 3,000 are basically pumping, is very low. A lot of people got burned. A lot of people are not as trustful of the markets, and so they're not as going to be likely to just throw their money into random coins. I'm not saying that some of those random coins aren't going to do well, but I would not expect the same thing as 2017, which is why you should pick your horses. And if it's a horse race, pick your horses and bet on ones that you actually think are decent. Don't just go down to CoinMarketCap and try to find some that have cool names. So that that's the point. And if you're holding these coins, if you have, say, a small percentage allocated, then just remember when Bitcoin breaks the 20-week, historically Bitcoin dominance goes up. And if Bitcoin dominance goes up, then even if Bitcoin prices are crashing by 20%, if you just had put your money into Bitcoin during that time, and then you waited a few weeks and sold at even a lower Bitcoin price, but if the Bitcoin dominance went up, then you're probably able to pick up whatever altcoins you had, and you're able to pick up an increased number of them. So that's just something to think about. Now for me, when we get above the 20-week, that's when I start diversifying more of my Bitcoin and my stablecoins back into other altcoins. So that is something to take into consideration. And by the way, when I talk about altcoins, I'm not talking about Ethereum, although I think Ethereum, when we're below the 20-week, it also doesn't perform that well. So I do tend to lump that in with, say, selling off and putting some more into Bitcoin. But when I'm converting back from Bitcoin to altcoins, you can bet that a lot of that's going into Ethereum, because it's certainly the most, as far as I'm concerned, it's certainly the most interesting coin besides Bitcoin, and it is number 2 in market cap. So that's just my perspective. I'm sure many of you would argue with me on that all day long about what coins you think are better. So if you want to do that in the comment section below. So if we go over here and look back at our weekly chart, looking at the 300-week moving average, if you're interested in trying to pick up some, if it were to drop to that, then you might want to look just north of that moving average. It doesn't mean we're ever going to get to that moving average. It doesn't mean we can't drop below that moving average. But if you're comfortable picking up Bitcoin at that price, if it drops to that, then you could always put your buy orders in. Now, the reason I say that is because a lot of people think, well, I'll just wait and see. And people up here, when Bitcoin was $14,000, would have been saying, man, I would give anything to buy Bitcoin at $5,000 or $4,000. But then when it gets there, and when the risk at that point is a lot lower, then they tend to not put their money where their mouth is. They then just say, okay, well, I'm just going to wait for it to go lower and lower and lower, and then I'll buy. Similar to over here, when people were saying, I will just wait for it to go to $1,000 or $1,800, and then I'll buy. And then, they see it go up, and then they see it go down, and they say, I told you so, it's going to $1,000, and then it doesn't, and then this happens, and then they FOMO in, at this point, or somewhere over here, and then they jump on the bandwagon that it's going to 100,000 in the next year. So it's a lot of flip-flopping. But on this channel, we don't claim to know what Bitcoin is going to do in the short term because I think it's often irrational what it's going to do. I personally, if I were just saying what my general feelings on the markets are right now, you know, with traditional markets being as bad as they are, I put some money into Bitcoin, but I'm also putting money into index funds and other areas that are down 30%, and I'll be continuing to do that over the next several months, hoping that the more discounts we can get over the next several months will hopefully be a good thing over the next several years, because the Dow being down 30% basically in 1 month is almost unheard of. So that is significant. So if you see traditional markets start to recover, which I don't think they're going to do in the short term by any means, then I think some faith would return back to cryptocurrency. But if you continue to see traditional markets getting pummeled day in and day out, I mean, maybe there's going to be a couple days here and there where they try to stabilize or they go up. But if you continue to see them decreasing, then I don't think that is going to necessarily bode well for cryptocurrency, just because it's not going to be the main thing that people tend to buy during an economic crisis, a recession, a bear market, whatever it might be. Because remember, Bitcoin has never lived through a global recession. It's never happened, and we are almost certainly heading into a recession. So it presents an opportunity, but at the same time, it's not impossible for Bitcoin to drop another significant percentage from where we currently are, because we're below the 200 week. We can't even really say that we're going to hold that anymore because we're already below it. So just something to take into consideration. And with the coronavirus growing, I think it really is a matter of time before the global economy is affected even more, because supply chains are being disrupted. There's a demand shock for certain goods, and then people aren't able to get those goods. And we've talked about a supply shock driven recession or a demand shock. Maybe the demand just won't be there because people aren't going to leave their homes. They're not going to be going to small businesses to purchase goods. They're not going to be purchasing services as much because they just they can't afford it. Small businesses are going to be laying off workers. And then some people who have taken out loans to invest are going to have to liquidate their holdings in whatever markets those are if price continues to go down so that they can pay back those loans. So consider the ramifications on a global level of the virus, because it is growing exponentially, and corporate earnings are going to be low. I mean, they're going to be very low this quarter. And I'm not trying to scare anyone. Obviously, I just want you to know that the global economy right now is not doing well. And if the global economy is not doing well, then interest in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin is not going to be as high. And you can see that when we had a 50% sell-off in one day. There are people that'll say, well, they're not correlated. I think it is correlated. I think you can't say that if coronavirus hadn't hit, that Bitcoin would have done this, would have done the exact same thing. And obviously we can't prove it one way or another, but I think the coincidence on it is too high to see that we're seeing a 30% plunge in traditional markets, and then we're also seeing something similar with Bitcoin in the same time frame. So keep that in mind. If you guys like the content, again, check out the YouTube channel, check out the Telegram channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll continue providing you guys updates, as we continue to go through this, and seeing if Bitcoin is going to recover anytime soon, or if we're going to be at these low risk levels for the foreseeable future, and hopefully continuing to accumulate cheap Bitcoin. And ultimately, if we can envision ourselves out in 2021 to 2022, we want to look back at that time and know that we bought Bitcoin and were able to accumulate as much Bitcoin as we could, when the prices were as cheap as possible. And whether that means you bought some Bitcoin at $5,000, and then you bought some at $4,000, and then maybe you bought some at $3,500. And then you bought it on the way up or something, whatever it might be. Just don't kick yourself for not guessing the bottom, because it's not healthy. No one can do it, and it's as simple as that. So I know this video is a little bit more global focused, more traditional market discussion as well, but I hope it's informative for everyone. Again, please check out the Telegram channel, and I will talk to you guys next time. Bye.